There is a country on the western shore of the Black Sea that has spent the last 4 years quietly learning how to do one very specific thing extremely well: find mines in the water and make them disappear. Romania did not choose this specialty. Russia's invasion of Ukraine chose it for them. Since 2022, sea mines, drifting loose from Ukrainian and Russian port defenses, have floated into Romanian, Bulgarian, and Turkish territorial waters, threatening commercial shipping, grain exports, and the safety of one of Europe's most important maritime corridors. Romania's navy has deactivated mines on at least 7 separate occasions. Together with Turkey and Bulgaria, it formed the Black Sea Mine Countermeasures Squadron, a trilateral force that has been sweeping, detecting, and neutralizing explosive devices across the western Black Sea for nearly 2 years. Romanian naval personnel now have more real-world mine clearance experience than almost any other European force. And now that expertise is being offered to the Strait of Hormuz. On March 20th, President Nicolae Dan announced that Romania had joined the Freedom of Navigation Declaration issued by the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Japan. A coalition statement that condemned Iran's closure of the strait, its attacks on commercial vessels, and its laying of naval mines. By March 21st, the list of signatory nations had swollen to over 30, including the UAE, Bahrain, Canada, South Korea, Australia, Denmark, and most of NATO's northern European members. Romania was among them. Dan was explicit about why. The closure of the strait was hammering global energy markets, spiking fuel prices inside Romania, and the effects were being felt directly by Romanian citizens. Then came the operational detail. Defense Minister Radu Măruță said Romania could contribute to de-escalation efforts in the strait by deploying staff officers, sharing intelligence, or sending personnel with experience in mine clearance gained in recent years in the Black Sea. Prime Minister Ilie Bolojan confirmed that Romania was prepared to participate in demining and surveillance operations once a ceasefire allowed such missions to proceed safely. He pointed to Romania's track record in post-conflict stabilization, including past missions in Bosnia, and stressed that Bucharest has typically contributed after hostilities ceased, not during active combat. This is not Romania joining a war, it is Romania offering to clean up after one. And that distinction is precisely what makes the move strategically significant, because what the Strait of Hormuz needs right now is not more warships. It is someone who knows how to find what Iran has left in the water. To understand why Romania's mine clearance offer matters, you need to understand the mine problem in Hormuz, because it is arguably the most underreported threat in the entire crisis. U.S. intelligence assessments confirmed that Iran began planting naval mines in the strait as early as March 10th. At least a dozen Maham 3 and Maham 7 limpet mines have been laid, according to sources who spoke to CBS News. These are not the massive moored contact mines of 20th century naval warfare. They are smaller, harder to detect, and designed to attach to ship hulls or sit on the seabed in shallow channels. The strait is only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Its shipping lanes compress traffic into a tight corridor. A single mine in the right position can close that corridor, not because it sinks a supertanker, but because the insurance industry will not cover a transit through a confirmed minefield. That is exactly what happened. War risk insurance was pulled by March 5th. Traffic collapsed. Iran did not need to sink a fleet. It needed to plant a few mines and let the actuarial tables do the rest. The U.S. air campaign has destroyed underground missile silos, fast attack boats, and drone launch pads. But mines are different. You cannot bomb a mine out of the water with a GBU-72. You cannot strafe it with an A-10's cannon. Mine clearance is slow, methodical, unglamorous work that requires specialized vessels, trained divers, robotic systems, acoustic and magnetic signature mimicry, and weeks of patient sweeping through contested waters. The UK has already announced plans to deploy unmanned mine-hunting drones and autonomous surface vehicles for exactly this purpose. But the more countries that can contribute trained mine clearance personnel, the faster the strait becomes navigable again. And Romania happens to have people who have been doing this under real-world conditions in a real conflict zone, the Black Sea, since the war in Ukraine began. This is where Romania's story intersects with a much larger strategic shift that most coverage has not connected. Romania is not a Gulf power. It has no permanent naval presence in the Persian Gulf. It has no historical military relationship with Iran or the Arabian Peninsula. A decade ago, the idea of Romanian mine clearance clearance specialists operating in the Strait of Hormuz would have seemed like a plot point from an unlikely thriller. But the war in Ukraine changed Romania's strategic identity in ways that are still unfolding. Start with geography. Romania sits on the Black Sea, directly across from Crimea. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion, Romania became a frontline NATO state overnight, not because Russian tanks were at its border, but because Russian mines were in its waters. Russian drones occasionally violated its airspace, and the security of the Black Sea corridor that carries Ukrainian grain to global markets depended partly on Romanian naval activity. Romania responded by increasing its defense budget by 19% in 2026, including a 38% increase in acquisition spending. It deepened its military cooperation with Turkey and Bulgaria through the Mine Countermeasures Squadron. It became the anchor state for Moldova's European integration path and a logistics hub for NATO's eastern flank. In other words, Romania built capabilities and habits of international military cooperation that were designed for the Black Sea and are now portable. The mine clearance expertise developed against Russian origin threats in the Black Sea applies directly to Iranian origin threats in the Persian Gulf. The intelligence sharing frameworks built with NATO allies for Black Sea situational awareness can extend to Hormuz operations with minimal adaptation. The staff officer deployments that Miruța mentioned are the connective tissue of coalition military planning, the kind of quiet, essential work that makes multinational operations function. Romania is not sending an aircraft carrier, it is sending something more useful: institutional competence in exactly the domain the crisis requires. There is also a political dimension that deserves attention. Romania explicitly ruled out offensive military involvement in the Middle East conflict. President Dan stressed that Romania maintains its clear decision not to get involved in combat. This is not hedging, it is positioning. Romania is offering help with the aftermath, the mine clearance, the de-escalation, the stabilization, without getting drawn into the war itself. That distinction allows Bucharest to contribute meaningfully to reopening the Strait while avoiding the political and diplomatic costs of being seen as a belligerent in a US-led conflict against Iran. It is a formula Romania has used before. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Bosnia, Romania contributed to international missions in stabilization and support roles, building credibility within NATO without overextending its military or its domestic politics. The Hormuz offer follows the same template. Be useful, be specific, be available, but do not get ahead of the ceasefire. Now widen the lens. Romania's move is part of a pattern that has been building across Europe's eastern flank since the Iran war began. Denmark has been tightening enforcement against Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic approaches. Sweden has been boarding Russian-linked tankers and enforcing maritime law against stateless vessels. Finland, Estonia, and the other Baltic states have signed the same freedom of navigation declaration. Moldova, with Romania as its strategic rear, has used the moment to advance its Transnistria reintegration plan, while Moscow is distracted. And now Romania is offering Black Sea-developed military skills to a crisis in the Persian Gulf. What connects all of these moves is a single underlying reality. The countries that border Russia's sphere of influence have spent 4 years developing capabilities, building coalitions, and hardening their institutions against Russian hybrid threats. Those capabilities, mine clearance, maritime law enforcement, drone defense, intelligence sharing, coalition planning, turn out to be relevant far beyond the Black Sea. The Ukraine war created a generation of European states that know how to operate in contested maritime environments. The Hormuz crisis is the first major test of whether that knowledge transfers. Romania is betting that it does. And the bet is not just about mines in the Persian Gulf. It is about demonstrating that a medium-sized NATO ally on the Black Sea can project useful capability into a global crisis, earn credibility with major partners, and position itself as a country that contributes to international security rather than merely consuming it. For a nation that joined NATO in 2004 and the EU in 2007, that is a significant evolution. Romania is no longer just a beneficiary of the Western security architecture. It is becoming a provider within it. There is one more layer to this story, and it is the one that matters most for the people watching fuel prices climb at petrol stations in Bucharest and across Europe. Romania's president was unusually direct about the economic motivation. He said Romania joined the declaration because the closure of the Strait has serious implications for global energy markets, and that the effects are being felt in Romania in terms of fuel prices. He committed to participating in efforts that would lead to maintaining prices at a bearable level for the population. That is not the language of geopolitical ambition. It is the language of a government watching its citizens pay more for diesel every week and deciding it cannot afford to be a bystander. 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. 30% of the world's traded fertilizer transits the same corridor. The closure has spiked Brent crude above $100, disrupted LNG supplies to Europe, and threatened food production globally by interrupting fertilizer flows during the spring planting season. Romania, which is positioning itself to become the EU's largest gas producer by 2027 through its Neptune Deep project in the Black Sea, has a direct economic interest in global energy market stability. Higher oil prices ripple through every sector of a national economy: transport, agriculture, manufacturing, heating. A country that can help reopen the Strait is not performing charity. It is protecting its own economic oxygen. And this is perhaps the most underappreciated dimension of the entire Hormuz coalition. The 30-plus nations that signed the Freedom of Navigation Declaration are not doing so out of abstract commitment to international law. They are doing so because the Strait's closure is costing their citizens money every single day. The coalition is not being held together by ideology. It is being held together by fuel receipts. That is a more durable foundation than most people realize, because the pain is immediate, universal, and does not require a committee to explain. Romania's contribution will not make headlines the way a carrier strike group does. Mine clearance specialists do not photograph well against a sunset. Staff officers in planning cells do not generate cable news segments. But the war in the Middle East will end eventually. And when it does, someone will need to sweep the mines out of the Strait before the first tanker can transit safely. Someone will need the trained divers, the autonomous detection vehicles, the methodical patience of a navy that has been doing this work in a real conflict zone for years. Romania is raising its hand and saying, "We have done this before. We learned it in the Black Sea, against mines that drifted south from a war we did not start. And we are ready to do it again, in waters 6,000 kilometers away, against mines planted by a different adversary in a different war. Because the strait that Iran closed affects the prices that Romanians pay, the energy that Europe needs, and the stability that the global economy depends on. A small country's quiet offer may not look like much against the backdrop of carrier strikes and bunker busters. But when the shooting stops and the mines remain, quiet competence will matter more than firepower. Romania knows this. It learned it the hard way, and it just volunteered to prove it again.